Farmdale Farm. We are a year 3 Oklahoma flower farm that sells retail market bouquets from our roadside stand. And today it is mid-March. We are getting ready to start our summer annuals. I can't believe it. We've been furiously harvesting tulips here in Oklahoma. Tulip season is like what feels like 10 to 14 days. So we have over 1,000 in our cooler right now, maybe 1,500 in our cooler. I think we have about 500 left in the field. So I feel like I've just been living in Tulipville lately, getting ready for our opening day, which Lord willing will be next Saturday. But in this video, I need to start our first succession of summer annuals. And so in this video, I thought I'd show you everything that I'm starting, like what varieties we are gonna grow, what colors, all that fun stuff. And then talk a little bit about why we choose to order so many plugs, and then how I decide what things I do want to start from seed, as well as a viewer requested tour of our flower cottage here. We've been working on getting it ready for the season really to start. And so it'd be a good time to walk through the space, give you kind of a tour of how I have it laid out, what I use it for, dimensions, all that fun stuff, in case you're looking for putting something together yourself or you're just interested in what space we have to work with. So I need to get soil and trays and get filling all those trays. I've got our seed starting soil. We use a seed starting mix from a local soil company here. I know the owner. I really like the ingredients because I can see exactly what's in it, and there's not like funky stuff in it that sometimes you can experience with like Lowe's bags and whatnot. I know ProMix is a good option. That's at Walmart, which is a farther drive for us. So I like this one. We get it at Ace. And then the trays I like to use are from Bootstrap Farmer. They're a heavier duty plastic tray that is in like a zigzag pattern. And so these holes allow the roots to air prune, a lot like you would get with the soil block, but it's your standard 72 count plug tray. I like using these for summer annuals. The seeds are bigger, the roots get bigger, and so it creates a really nice plug. So we have 15 of these trays that we've invested in that we can use year after year, which I like. And I need to use 14 of them today. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get them all filled here outside. So I make a mess here on our gravel area outside the cottage. And then I'll bring the trays in, find my proper labeling sticks, and get sowing the seeds, and we'll talk about what I'm doing. One tray done, nicely filled. Only 13 more to go. 14 trays filled, took me a bit of time outside. Normally I seed start inside the cottage, but the Lord gave us finally a not windy day, which is very rare here in Oklahoma. I'm actually going to seed start outside because that way on our table here that I have, I can also water them in and make the mess in here. And then when I'm completely done, I'll take the trays inside to where they're gonna live on the grow lights, which means I'll have less of a cleanup inside the cottage, which I always appreciate. But I need to go get the seeds. The seeds are obviously stored inside here. Got my seed starting case. This is a really popular way to store your seeds. It's just a photo album. But I'm doing marigold, basil, and zinnias today is what we're going to be starting. I also have here my labeling. I'm doing everything vlog style today because Eric's busy, so stick with me. So I've got my labeling sticks, and then I think we'll do, what do we have here? Yes, a garden marker is ideal because it can get wet and it's not going to disappear, which would suck when you're seed starting. So I've got my supplies here and back outside. On my phone, I have everything I'm going to start today, along with how many trays of each I need for varieties. So I'm going to use that, and I'm going to label first because I like having all the sticks labeled because my hands are about to get really dirty with the seeds, and so that way all the labels are done and they can just get stuck right in the trays once it's sowed, and I can have everything lined up to water in. Like I said, I'm starting our summer annuals. We order most of our flowers from plugs, or they're like bulbs or corms, you know, like ranunculus or anemones and stuff. But we choose to start basil, marigold, zinnias, sunflowers, and celosia from seed. The reason being primarily is that they're really easy to start from seed. Obviously, sunflowers we now direct sow, so that's super simple and taken care of. Zinnias, basil, marigolds, they all germinate really well. They grow very quickly, and so often, especially zinnias and marigolds, they're ready to transplant in like 3 or 4 weeks. That's really simple. They don't need a lot of fussing. They don't need a heat mat. They don't need humidity domes. They don't need like technical surface sowing and being really careful not to let them dry out. It's just like you sow them, you're going to get pretty high germination. If one of them, a couple cells don't germinate, you just pop another seed in, hopefully get to 100 in your tray. 3-4 weeks later, you plant out. They're super easy. Some of the other stuff we grow, like snapdragons, lisianthus, statice, you can start them from seed, of course, so many people do, but they take longer. They need to live in their cell trays a lot longer, and they can be fussier to germinate. Sometimes you need heat mats and humidity domes, the surface sowing. I don't want to do that. When I calculate cost, you have to include your time. And one thing most people don't do is they don't account for their time. We make a truncated view of seed starting and think like, oh, well, you could buy plugs and you know that costs hundreds of dollars, or you could buy a $5 seed packet and only spend $5. It's like, well, no, not exactly. That's not really the calculation of just the cost of the plug box and then your seed packet, because you have to have all these trays. For example, I wanted the Bootstrap Farmer trays. Those are pretty expensive. If you don't want to buy the expensive ones, you are getting the cheaper ones, but then you're more likely having to rebuy every year. So that's a continual cost. You have the soil cost. I just filled 14 trays with about 2.5, maybe a little bit more bags in soil. So that's about $35–40 that I spent. I've got my packets of seeds, so I probably got at least $20–30 in seeds. It's going to take me, this project today, at least 2 hours to get done. That is time. And then from now on, every single day I have to come out and water and take care of them. And if it's a snapdragon or it's a lisianthus or something that you're spending weeks doing, you know, every single day, that time adds up. And no, I don't think necessarily when you start from seed or buy plugs, they end up being the exact same value. But I don't think it's quite as disparate as a lot of people make it out to be. And you do need to factor in your labor. And so I don't want to be seed starting in January and February. We're homeschooling, it's winter, we're resting. The extent of our farm chores is crop planning for the year and making sure our tunnel and field, you know, have their row covers on and off. I don't want to be coming out here to the cottage to start seeds. I don't want to be paying for electrical and everything in the cottage to keep it the temperature. I don't want to start seeds February 1st. It's so much easier. And it's worth the cost is what I'm saying, to know next week I'm going to get 2 boxes of Snapdragon plugs delivered, and I haven't been babying them for the past 6 weeks starting in early February to get to that point. It also mitigates loss. You know, we've all had seed starting disasters. Things die, it's confusing, they wilt, you get a mold thing, whatever can happen, and then you're really set back in your crop plan when you have to start again and buy more seeds and all of that. And so there's a surety too when you buy plugs to a certain extent for really important crops on your farm. So what I'm not saying is that if you're a year 1 grower, you should go spend, you know, $200 on some snap plugs, because one, I don't know if in your first year you should be growing like 600 snapdragons, for example. But as you're scaling up your farm, so you know you're entering into year 2, 3, 4, your customers are growing, you're selling a lot more, I think it might be worth it to do the calculations and consider plugs. That's only something you can decide on your labor and your expenses and what you want to do. But for us, minimizing how much seed starting labor I am doing actually makes us more profitable in many ways than if I were to be doing a lot of this myself from seed. And mentally, that's a non-monetary factor to include. Mentally, I felt really well rested this winter because now it's March and we're full on into our season and everything. But I didn't spend January and February doing a ton of farm stuff. I was with the kids a ton. We got ahead great on homeschool. We did fun crafts and projects and did stuff inside, and we rested and hung out with friends. And it's like I got a true break. And then we launch in March with everything, and I'm not, doing seed starting tasks every single day. And I really value and appreciate that mental break and bifurcation, in our year and the seasonality that farming is. And so I think it's important to consider. It's important to consider and make those choices for your own farm of what is the wisest and financially smartest way to go. But I'm going to get labeling. How am I going to do this? I think I'm going to label, and then I'll grab a label and a seed packet and get sowing. I'm not going to show this whole process because I feel like if you're watching this, you've probably grown a zinnia before and you don't need like a 101 on how to start zinnia seeds, for example. But here, let's do this. Let's talk here for a second because I did say this. Let's talk about what I am starting so you know the varieties, and I'll have Eric put the picture up on the screen. Thank you, Eric, ahead of time for doing that. So for basil, I am starting lemon basil. All of these are going to be succession planted, and so there's going to be different colors and sub-varieties that will go in like group 2, or succession plant 2, and I'm sure we'll do a video about that. But in succession 1, I'm doing lemon basil. The smell and the color is what I want for spring. We are going to do, for marigold, we're going to do the variety Cocoa Gold. I love this one. Huge flowers, strong stems, heavy producer. So I'm going to do Cocoa Gold. And then zinnias. I am going to do lime zinnia. It's a binary. People are hit or miss on this one of whether they like it. I was obsessed last year. I thought it was such a pop of interesting like chartreuse green color in the bouquets. It's so spring. It goes with all the pinks and purples and whites that are blooming at the time. So I loved it. I'm going to do Queen Blush, so the Queen series blush. I'm going to do the pink binary zinnia. That's like the bubblegum pink. Big old loud angry trucks today. And then Carmine binary. That's a like a pinky purple combo one. And then the Queen Mix. And in the Queen Mix, you'll have like the yellows, the oranges, the pinks all in it. So that's what I'm doing. And if you notice, all those colors are very spring. And so these zinnias will bloom in June for us. And in June, I'm also still going to be having some larkspur. I'm going to have a lot of our snapdragons that are in the pastel family. So I don't want orange and like red, those like darker, more saturated colors in our first flush of summer annuals. I want to keep it on the softer end of the color spectrum. And then when I do the second succession, obviously we're going to get more like late summer and into fall. And so like the deeper purples, the oranges, and the like burgundies, that kind of stuff will show up. And so that's how I plan succession planting as well. It's typically by color. So let's get sowing. Then I'll water them. I'll get them on the seed racks and we'll do a cottage tour. All the seeds are done. That took me a little longer than I hoped. My back hurts a little bit from hunching over the table, but I got the 14 trays done of everything I showed you. They're on the seed racks, which you'll see in a minute. But I'm out here in front of the cottage, and so I wanted to give you the little tour here at the end and give you some details about our space. We are in the process of cleaning it up from just its winter rest and getting things either in the trash that are trash or in their homes where they need to be, and organization. So things that looks a little bit like the cottage threw up. But the cottage itself is 14 by 28. It was an unfinished shed structure that Eric bought, and then he finished it on the inside. And then he added this roof himself last year, along with like our lattice windscreen. We added some nice cafe lights for when we eat out here and stuff. We can add tables. But like I said, we're trying to get all of our supplies out and things folded and put away. But this is the front structure. And on the side here, we have a mounted, what am I trying to say? Extendable hose, extension hose, so I can water seedlings. I was processing tulips here and stuff. So definitely looks like a working space right now, let me tell you. When we first walk in on this storage rack here, this is where we store all of our like pesticides and fungicides and fertilizer and all of the liquids that we want to keep like somewhat temperature controlled, as well as our extra supplies. So like soil blocking trays when I need soil blocks. We have box of gloves, some cover crop, some more of the bigger pesticides and stuff down here. That's what we store in this rack over here. We are borrowing a fridge from our neighbor right now because, like I said, we're drowning a bit in tulips. So that's sitting here. But when you walk into the space, it's really big and spacious, and it's wonderful how Eric finished it with the wall paneling and the floors and the ceiling with the recessed lighting that he gave me to work with. So it doesn't feel like a shed inside. It just feels like a really nice indoor space to use. He added these shelves here where we don't do like florist arrangements and stuff where I really need vessels, but I liked it because it was an open wall. It's kind of some nice decor. I do use the mason jars sometimes and can otherwise, you know, put stuff on the shelves so it gets up off the floor. Shop vac for cleaning up. We added this galvanized steel sink, which makes it just really easy for utility use. It's easy to clean off and wipe. It's nice to have a hand washing station, can dry my hands, throw the trash away. It's easy to fill up watering cans or any of the stuff to water the seedling trays. It makes it really easy, especially because it has this extendable hose. I can bring this tray over and just water it and bring it back to the seed rack. So the sink is wonderful. And then I have two tables to process things on. I have this one really long table here, and then the shorter, wider, deeper, I guess, table here. Typically my workflow, if you've watched our videos, is I put all of our harvest buckets here on the floor. I make our bouquet arrangement piles here. This can tend to get like wet or dirty or just, you know, like I was clearly processing tulips. But then when I need a for sure dry space, I bring them over here to this table, and this is where I wrap, or I rubber band, wrap, and staple, and then ultimately they get put in our galvanized steel buckets for the stand itself, because they're nicer, you know, than like the black florist harvesting buckets. I like to use the steel ones. And so that's kind of how I've divided the space in my workflow, where I make the bouquets on this side and then I finish them on this side, and then they get put back more towards the entry when they're finished, and Eric can load them on the tractor over here. I really like that. It's nice. Obviously our volume is increasing this year, so we'll see how this space does. I'm gonna make it work, obviously, because Eric built that nice porch overhang. If I need to bring buckets out there, they have a nice shady spot. We're thinking about putting some like rolling shelf racks underneath this table at some point. I have a box here of our pre-cut sheets. This year, instead of cutting our own, which I've previously done, you can see a craft roll right there, which was easy and fine and cheap. We spent a little bit more money to have the pre-sheets done, and I'm absolutely loving it because it's just speeding up my process so much more. There's 1,600 in the box. I'm probably going to move this because we're going to get ready to open next weekend, and I'll be making a lot of bouquets in here. So this is going to need to be completely clear for bouquet making, and I might even move some of this stuff off so it's really clear, open workspace. Chairs here for when we film the videos that you guys have seen. And then on the wall here, we have like our meta calendar that Eric particularly likes because he can see like when certain things are being delivered, like these plugs are coming at this time, so I need these rows to be ready, or I'll note when I fertilized, and just kind of like the big notes. And then I have our own, like on our iPhones, we take particular notes. But here in the corner are our two seed racks. Right now this is 14 trays, so obviously I could add 2 more for 16 trays going this direction. If you soil blocked, you could obviously fit way more, but they're just Amazon LED lights that link together. They work great. And then we have them on a timer that's back there, so it turns on and off itself for 16 hours of light for them, so I don't have to worry about that. And then over here we have a fan, so when they germinate and start growing, I'll bring the fan out here, and also have the fan on a timer for strong seedlings for Oklahoma wind. And then up here is just what we use for heating and cooling the place. Yes, it gets pretty hot in the summer, but this thing does a pretty good job. Works really hard for me. So that's our space. I'm deeply thankful for this flower cottage. It's not in one sense, it's not a necessity because I know Eric made it pretty fancy for me, and I'm grateful for that because it's just enjoyable to be in. But as we scaled up and entering into year 3, where I'm making like 50, 60, 70 bouquets at a time, that's obviously not something that I can conceivably do at the kitchen table or dining room table. I needed a dedicated space. Yes, that could be a garage, especially in the beginning, but I just really feel like we are using this space so much now, and I'm thankful that we invested in it in the way that we did. So I love being in here. I'm glad I got the seeds started. I hope I gave you some interesting things to think about when you are deciding, maybe as your farm scales up, whether to do seeds or plugs. Another thing I didn't mention that I thought also is, yes, the plug quantities can be a lot, but maybe if you have another flower farming friend or people local, you can always go in on an order together, and maybe that might help it'll reduce the cost, obviously, but then also mean you don't have to plant as much, because each box, you know, you need 3 trays in a box, and maybe you go in with a friend and you only take like 1.5 trays, that sort of thing. So there's creative ways around it, but I'm a plug girl. I support the plugs. If you're doing it in a smart way, if you're just buying plugs and then planting thousands of flowers and you don't have customers to sell them to, I'm not going to support that decision. But if it is a wise time saver, cost saver in certain ways for you, and you have a way to sell those flowers that you invested in plugs for, then I think you should do it, because I'm grateful that that's our plan. And next week we have snapdragons coming, and then we have status and Lizzie's coming. It's on the calendar. Eric was burning fabric today, so we're ready for it. And I'm not having to worry about those seedlings and agonize over them. And I'm already dreading waiting and watching for those darn zinnias to germ. But I also feel like it's a little excessive to buy zinnia plugs when they are so easy. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Not every farm task is flashy and filled with armfuls of flowers, but it's really important tasks, because if I am going to have June flowers, today needed to happen. So I'm glad we've stayed on schedule. I'll update the calendar so I know that I did it, take all my notes for tracking. But right now I think I'm gonna go walk through the tunnel and see if I see any new ranunculus blooming, because they are so close. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye guys.